Phil believes that he was able to decipher the tablets and the treasure map, and actually followed it for 2 days. And I believe from his translation of the symbols and my experience in treasure symbols, I believe that he was spot on. And I think that if we went to that spot and we dug up at that quartz vein, that we would hit gold. Of course, the limitations of the federal government don't allow us to go there with shovels and pickaxes and do that.
Follow TJ as he investigates and locates artifacts in a city that has a history dating back to the early 1800s. A city that has seen fierce battles, rich oil tycoons, and the birth of our nation's space program. With a metropolitan population of over 6 million people, there is only one urban treasure hunter.
While visiting the Superstition Mountains Museum, a fellow treasure hunter, Phil Reinhardt, took us to the back of the museum where the actual Peralta Stones were. He gave us his interpretation of the maps. Alright, this is Phil Reinhardt, and this guy, in my opinion, knows where the gold is in the Superstition Mountains. And camera girl, what I'd like to do is film these tablets that were found in 1940s.
Yeah, 1949.
And he's just going to run through the treasure maps. And this is amazing.
Treasure maps, map of the desert, a couple of important things that you'd have to show on a map in order to use it. You have to show compass orientation and direction of travel. And that's accomplished on this map right here by that little tiny cross above the word L. And directly over the C in Kabbalah, which is a misspelled word, is a very small letter E for este or east, and that compass orients that portion of the map right there. And then over here on the map it tells you to pasture to the north of the river. And then while you're traveling, and the way they traveled in those days would be line of sight. They'd pick a distant object and they'd travel to it. In this particular case, that wavy line right above that little cross is the Gila River, which is south of here 25 miles. And in 1848, just a couple of months after this map was written or carved, that became the new international border between Mexico and the United States when the Mexican-American War ended. So that was the edge of the known universe in 1847. And there were people living along the river, the Indians, but beyond them there was nobody for 150 to 200 miles in any direction. So this was a barren place, and they had to design a map that was going to take you out across the desert and into the mountains to the right mountain and the right location. And they did that by traveling from the little cross above the word L, past those two little circles with dots in them, which represent peaks, small little mountains, to the thing that looks like an omega sign, which is really a local landmark that when viewed from 25 miles out in the desert appears to come up out of the desert just as one single bump. And then while you're traveling from the cross to the omega sign, it tells you to pasture to the north of the river. And they show you the river, and it's got a five and these little holes drilled in it, and that's telling them that there's 5 water holes, and each one of those is a potential water source. And when you cross the river, you cross it right there at the word Rio when you're traveling in a straight line from here to there. That water hole is still in existence today, and how that was made was a dam built, an earthen dam built on a tributary of a wash, so that when the wash ran, the bowl that they built with the dirt berm filled up with water, and it stored that water seasonally. It's so old that on the back side of that water containment dike is a dead saguaro skeleton and a dead ironwood tree. And when they were digging those, they didn't landscape. So those either got thrown up there as small plants or seeds, and they grew, lived, and died on the back side of that water hole, kind of giving us some perspective as to how old it is. In 1847, a young lieutenant in the Mormon Battalion coming across the Gila River watershed to California commented in his notes about the unusual method the Indians had for damming up and securing water on a seasonal basis, which was to build an earthen dam across a tributary to a wash. Now, the Rio they're talking about here, we happen to call that Queen Creek. It seems like a creek.
Rio.
To us, but it's got 3 dams on it. So back then, it was a river. When it ran, it really ran. And that's a very distinguishable spot. You can actually find some of those clues on Google Earth. So after you make that trek across the desert, you see the horse that represents the Superstition Mountains. The last clue on the horse is the tail, and it kind of disappears behind the horse.
Now let me ask you, why does the horse represent Superstition Mountains?
That's backwards. All right? The horse was represented because that's what the mountain looked like.
From that point of view?
From that point of view. And if you look right over here, here's the horse's head. There's his ears.
Oh, yeah.
There's his head. Now this is poorly shadowed because this was an early morning photograph. If it were a later day photograph, then this portion of the mountain would be clear where you could see the muzzle and the cheekbone of the horse.
Wow.
And then this ridge line right here represents the mane that comes down off the horse on the stone maps.
Wow.
And then right above the horse on the stone maps, there's a circle with a dot indicating a peak. And there it is right there.
Wow.
When there's mountains and 360 degrees around you, to pick one single mountain out, it had to be something unique. And the fact that it looked like a horse, that's the uniqueness of it. There's no other mysticism associated with it. It just happens to be that's what that mountain looked like. The tail disappears behind the horse. So that told me perhaps it's time to go around to the back of the map. And when you do, there's another map.
Oh my gosh.
And this map, called the Priest map, continues your journey. On the first map, we established that the little cross was the direction of travel. As with all the other signs on the maps, they always mean the same thing every time they're used. So if we started out with that little cross being the direction of travel, we come around to this big map and there's 2 crosses on it, one on the shoulder and one in the hand. The one on the shoulder has little brackets on either side of it, and that tells you that there's a gigantic canyon right here that you could take going up that way, but it's the wrong one. Don't take it. Continue traveling to the east like the big cross shows you. The reason we know it's east is because the pointed hat on the priest is the north marker on this map, and every map has to have one. Otherwise you can't use it. So when you continue to travel east along the trail, which is represented by the hemline of the priest, and you see it there, it's this curvy, wavy line at the bottom of the hemline. That's kind of how the trail goes. It weaves up and down over the foothills of the mountains, all the time heading east. And then all of a sudden, you've been on the trail for a while and you're not sure you're right. You're looking for another clue, and then those 3 blocks on the front of the priest come into play, and on the hillside going up to the mountain that you're coming around is a monolithic block of stone that looks like 3 wooden blocks stacked on top of each other. It's about 60 feet square on the bottom and about 30 or 40 feet high, just to let you know you're on the right trail. because all the trails in the wilderness are prehistoric, so they've always been there. So you continue on that trail, and pretty soon you come to the base of a mountain, represented by that circle with a circle in it, which makes it a slightly bigger mountain than the one with a circle with a dot in it on the other side. Happens to be by name Miner's Needle. And when you get to the base of Miner's Needle on the trail, and you look up at Miner's Needle, it's got an eye through it. Just a round hole at the very top of the mountain. But we've used the circle represent mountains, so they couldn't draw a hole for the eye and have it be consistent, so they drew that little crescent right there. And what that crescent is the eyebrow, the rock that forms the outside edge of the hole. It's just a little crescent. And then the trail goes around to the back of the mountain, and you see it and you look back in the other direction, and consequently the crescent is turned in the other direction because you're looking at it from the other side.
Wow.
The little rectangle with a cross in the middle tells me it's time to change maps to this map.
Oh my goodness.
And when you get to that map, they were in tablet form. They open up in front of you, and you find yourself down here at the bottom of the mountain range. There's the mountain represented by that wavy line right there. And you're right down here at the bottom. My friends and I affectionately call this up, because everything from that spot forward is up.
That's heart-shaped.
I think what this leads to was a vein of exposed quartz that had free gold in it.
Okay, now,
And I think that's the root source of the Lost Dutchman legend. It's one of those things that people that are interested in it will go to great lengths to pursue it. But people that sit behind a desk in Washington, D.C. and tell us what we can and cannot do in the Arizona desert, I don't hold those people in terribly high regard.
me neither.
I thought you did, Phil.
They have a job to do, but I have a job to do. And my job is, you know,
More
finding
interesting.
a treasure.
Okay,
And they're
so,
getting in the way.
so have you actually taken this map and
Yes,
followed it?
on a number of occasions I have. It's an incredibly precise map. Even though it was made 165 years ago, everything that's on the map still exists today, and everything is quite prominent when seen from the right spot on the trail. If you don't see the clue, then you're not on the trail. It's well into the mountains. It takes me 2 days to get there.
So what have you found when you got there?
Well, I found a quartz stringer that was only visible for about 1.5 feet, and then it disappeared into the ground. And I put my metal detector together, and I followed the strike of that vein about 25 feet down this arroyo where I got a signal. And because my metal detector was going off, my partner, who was hiking up on the shoulder of this arroyo behind me, looked over my shoulder because he heard the sound. And when he looked over my shoulder, on the left shoulder of the arroyo was a stone heart put together, made out of 2 pieces of stone that only looked like a heart from the spot I was standing, or the spot he was standing on that line. Anywhere else you looked at it, it just looked like a couple of rocks laying there.
Wow, and there's the heart.
And that's
Holy
the
cow.
heart. So it was a very exciting story.
Oh, that is.
Unfortunately, the level of proof for something like this is the old proverbial 5-pound nugget in your hand.
Yeah.
Nothing else is proof.
Now, what kind of detector do you swing?
A Mine Lab 3500
Very good.
with
Very
a
good.
17-inch coil.
Now, so what's stopping you from going out there with a rock hammer and some equipment and just banging it and getting that gold out?
federal law.
The federal government.
Yeah, the federal government says you're not allowed to do anything in the wilderness but hike. So you can't dig, you can't pick anything up, you can't leave anything behind.
Now you can metal detect.
You can metal detect in the national forest, of which the wilderness is part of. They passed that law, or that permit back in the 80s when metal detectors penetrated the ground a few inches. They figured anything you'd find would be contemporary: buttons, pop tops, lost pocket knives. My metal detector goes 36 inches into the ground, so my signal was well down into the ground, but still within the guidelines of find a target with your metal detector, dig it up, fill the hole, and you're done. I haven't done that yet. I hope to.
Will you update us when you go there?
Oh, I surely will. I'm sure you'll hear about it. It'll probably be on the news when they show the federal marshals hauling me away in handcuffs. But it's a good potential story.
That if I went to prison for anything, that's what I'd like.
That'd be the one to go for, right? Finding the lost Dutchman. Ultimately, and I'll make that case in my next book, which will be out in September. It's called Straight to the Heart.
Wow.
Wow.
I think there's good reason for me to say that I believe that this is the source of the Lost Dutchman legend. This happened 25 years before he got here. And people have been looking for a mine for so long that there's obviously not one out there. That leads me to believe that they're looking for the wrong thing. They're looking for a hole in the side of a mountain.
Yeah.
And we're really dealing with a quartz outcropping.
There you go.
And
Wow.
the difference is, if it were a mine, you'd have to dig all that rock out and dump it over the edge. If you were mining a quartz vein, everything you broke out of that vein would be the good stuff, and you'd keep it. There wouldn't be any tailing.
Okay, Phil's going to tell us about his book that he wrote.
Well, I wrote this book with my friend Rick Wynn, my hiking partner, back a number of years ago. And I have a new one coming out in the fall, and it's going to be Straight to the Heart. And that's what's in this book, is it tells all the stories of all the people that thought they had them figured out. When I was writing it, I had a treasure hunter friend that lives in Utah, and we were having phone conversation. And his name is Floyd Mann. He's a very well-known treasure hunter of old. And he said, so let me get this straight, Phil. If I come down there and I buy your book, and I look in your book's going to have instructions on exactly how to follow these maps to the exact location. He said, is that true? I said, yes, it is. He said, well, listen, while you're signing books on the patio at the museum, he said, I'm going to be in the mountains digging up your treasure. So that made me rethink putting everything into my first book.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
my next book has been written for a number of years. I'm updating it with photographs, and
Photographs of the treasure.
that would be nice. But photographs primarily of the landmarks, the things that cause the map to come to fruition.
At www.superstitionmountainmuseum.org you can get Phil's book. So why don't we meet at midnight at that place tonight, and we'll see if the federal government comes out there. While
I've heard a million solutions. Right? If you had some cash, I'm talking about real cash, you could go down to Falcon Field, and I guarantee you could find a helicopter pilot that needs a payment to be made.
Yes.
Well, he flies you out at dusk and drops you off in the mountains and comes back in to get you for a couple of days. You know, those are the things television is made of. In the real world, that kind of stuff doesn't happen too very often. Number one, that guy doesn't want to go to jail because it's against the law to come below 500 feet when you're over the wilderness.
So we'll have to parachute in there.
And you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to fly over and drop anything in there, or you're not allowed to stash anything in there. You're not allowed to pack your water in and go back and can get some more water.
Wow.
It's just, they're very, very restrictive.
I would have called it the Pamela Anderson Mountain.
Well, that's the problem, is too many people see too many things. None of which you've seen, I might add.
See the big cresting?
Whatever.